Let me get that set up and then we'll get started because it's a little after 1 o'clock.
And I'll just go ahead and add, Elizabeth, if you have questions or comments, if you'll put those in the chat box, we'll make sure and get those answered and shared.
You are on Facebook, Elizabeth. I see it.
All right, very good. It's always nice when that works. Let me just knock on wood though, because you know how technology goes, especially in 2020 and 2021. So thank you all for being here at your home or at your desk, wherever you are, for this program on downsizing and organizing. If you don't know me, I'm Elizabeth Coots. I'm the Family and Consumer Sciences Agent in Woodford County with the University of Kentucky Cooperative Extension Service. And I'm here to present this program on downsizing and organizing. This program is actually for the Extension Homemaker members in the Fort Herod area, as it is their lesson of the month for February. But of course, anyone is always welcome to attend these programs. And since we're virtual, anyone is invited to attend or watch the recording. But we are glad that you are here with us today, whether on Zoom or Facebook Live or watching the recording. So we're glad you are here. So on Zoom, we had a poll that we launched as everyone came in. And the question was, where are you in the downsizing process? Now, we're going to go ahead and end the poll and share the results. But it looks like the majority of people are slowly downsizing. And that's good because it is definitely a slow process. So let's see, I think, can we share the results? So yeah, the majority of you are slowly downsizing, about half. And it looks like the rest of the majority is either not even thinking about it or kind of thinking about it. And one person has already downsized. They've already done the process, so that's great. It is certainly a lot of work, both physically and mentally, to downsize. So hopefully with this program and with some tips that I'll be sharing with you, that maybe it'll make the process a little less intimidating for you and easier to go through. I do want to make note that there are some materials I will be referring to today. I am going to put the link to the PDFs in the chat in Zoom. And Carly, if you would be so kind as to share those on Facebook. There are two handouts. One of them is Downsizing Your Home, just kind of the general publication. And the other one, it has two activity sheets, some question and answers. We won't be going through the activity sheets today for this program, but I am going to be talking about those. So I just want to make sure that you have the materials that I'll be referring to. You don't need those, to go along with this lesson, but they're there to go back and read and go through the information. So let's get started with a fact. So the average person will move. Now, I don't know how this figure is calculated, but 11.7 times during their lifetime. Now, maybe the 0.7 is like moving bedrooms or, down the hall, but the average person, so between 11 and 12 times during their lifetime. And if you've ever moved, which probably all of us have, maybe once, maybe 11 times, it is a process just to move. We tend to have a lot of stuff. And putting all that in boxes and moving is a process. So you can imagine that downsizing is not only putting our stuff in boxes and moving it to the next house, but it's taking our belongings and moving them in different areas and moving into a smaller house. So we have fewer belongings. So like I said, it takes a lot of effort to downsize, both physical and mental. For me, the mental is as exhausting as the physical. And it may be, like I said, something that you're considering now, but it might be something in your future too. And maybe you know somebody who could benefit from downsizing that you could help. So hopefully in this program, you can either get started or think about how to get started so it's less intimidating. So we have 3 objectives today: to understand the steps of the downsizing process, to identify strategies for preparing your home for downsizing, and to identify strategies for preparing for the move into a new, smaller home, the actual moving of your things. So I am going to share my screen. Need that Jeopardy music again. Okay. So I liked that. Can everybody see my screen? I liked this little comic. If you can't read it because the text is a little bit small, depending on your device, it is an elderly gentleman on a walker with his adult son next to him looking into a cluttered, full garage. And he's saying, "One day, son, this will all be yours." Now, I hope that you can get a little bit of a chuckle out of that. I think that you may have been on either side of that, in either one of those perspectives. And this isn't really part of the lesson, but you may have experienced this, or you may know that younger adult children nowadays tend to want less of their parents' belongings. I have a friend who is saying that, you know, all her kids are out of the house and she's thinking about passing on china, you know, dishes that have been in the family for a long time and some antique furniture. And she's like, my kids don't want any of this stuff. What am I going to do with it? So that's kind of a whole nother thought process in the process of downsizing. So what exactly is downsizing? Of course, we think of, we are talking about home. You can downsize you know, a business or something like that, but we are talking about a home today, a house. It has definitely become a trend in recent years. Oops. Can you still see? Okay, yeah. Sorry, I'm having a little, can you still see my screen? Okay. I don't know what happened there. But it has certainly become a trend, not only for older adults, but there's a show on TV about, you know, how small of a home can you live in and be happy. So it has definitely become more popular. So downsizing is to reduce in size, and organizing, these are the definitions, is to form a coherent unity or a functioning whole. So while we're talking mostly about downsizing today, we can't really talk about downsizing without talking about organizing. So we're going to talk about both of those. So why would you want to downsize? Well, there's probably many reasons, partly because of the trend, but a smaller home means that there's likely going to be less maintenance and probably is going to mean more savings for the homeowner. You might be getting closer to retirement, or you might be in retirement. You might want to make things a little more simpler. A smaller home can do just that. Maybe you want to move and be closer to family. Maybe you have an empty nest, you know, if your adult children have moved out and you're ready for and need a smaller home. And why would we want to organize? Well, again, to live a little more simply. Typically, less physical stuff might mean, maybe not typically, but it might mean that you have less to think about. I know some people say that all your physical stuff is also up here mentally. And I think there is a little bit of truth to that. But organizing can mean in the long run that you will spend less energy on always organizing. The old saying of a place for everything and everything in its place. It's nice to find what you need when you need it. You don't have to go hunting for it. So let's talk a little bit about the downsizing process. It involves lots of decisions, which can definitely leave you feeling overwhelmed and unsure. And, you know, sometimes a roadblock comes up and you don't want to continue. But if you plan for it and you learn ahead of time about the process of downsizing, it can hopefully help to alleviate some of the stress of that process. So I want you to think about it in 3 steps, okay? research and select a housing option and learn about what your options are, sort through your stuff, and prepare for the move. Okay, so it's a lot easier to say you can downsize in 3 easy steps than actually going through the steps. But if we think about it like that, research and think about what are your housing options, sorting through all your belongings, and preparing for the actual move. So this first part, identifying your needs and wants for a new home, is part of that, the handout that I mentioned earlier. On the back of the first page, it has a list where you can type in, or excuse me, write in the different housing options that you have and what are the pros and cons of those. And one of the activity sheets, the one that has the blue on it, lists out each of those. So for example, and I'm not going to go in detail in each of these because they're written here, but there's the age restricted community. What are the pros and cons of those? Senior apartments, pros and cons. Continuing care retirement communities, that's kind of like an age in place community. An assisted living facility, and a long-term care or skilled nursing facility. And of course, it is the pros and cons of each of these, we might agree on some, but it's really going to be personal. You know, an age restricted community, that might be, you know, something that that really appeals to you, that only people that are 55 and older can live there. But then again, that might be something that is a con to you because there's not going to be any families with young children, and maybe you like that about your community. So that's very personal and something that you can do to think about what are your options. And really, even if you take, you know, the financial aspect out of this, and just think about these different options and what are the pros and cons to you. And then you can get back to the financial aspect of it, which really today in this program, we're not talking about the financial aspect of it, even though that is definitely something that you're going to have to consider. And that may go on your pro-con list of these different housing options that you have in your community. Okay, so the number 2 is to prepare your former home and your possessions. Rita, can you I think there's a little bit of background noise. Can you make sure everybody's muted? And if everybody on your end, if you would make sure you're muted, that would help. Thank you. So downsizing involves the very difficult task.
Rita's muted you, I think.
Okay, sorry. Okay, let me just start over with that thought process. So downsizing involves sorting through all your stuff, all your possessions. And I think personally that out of the 3 steps, this is the one that takes the most time, physical and mental energy to decide what you were going to do with your belongings, what you're going to take with you, what you're going to give away, etc. So a good method to start this process in your house is room by room and space by space, and start with the area of your home or the room that you use the least often. So that might be the attic or the basement or a spare bedroom that has become the storage room. Start there, one piece at a time. And depending on how big your home is and how many belongings you have and how many nooks and crannies you have that have little belongings is going to depend on how much time it's going to take you. Now, if you have a goal that you have to be out of your house by this day, obviously you are going to have to figure out, you know, how much you need to do each day. Hopefully, though, you're at a point where you're just thinking about it, or you're thinking about it, and you have plenty of time to slowly go through all of your space in your home and your possessions, because it takes a lot of energy to do that. So think about that. Where in your home are you the least often? Or what space do you use the least often? Start there and go through with that process. And another tip too, and this may or may not work, but is to ask someone to help you. Now, you need to be very careful if you're going to ask someone to help you go through all your stuff, because A, your stuff is your stuff and it's probably personal, and you want this person to be able to actually help you and not make it harder. Okay, you don't want that person to stress you out. It might be beneficial if it's not a family member, especially if you hold maybe some of the family heirlooms that there's a lot of sentiment and emotion attached to. If someone outside of that space can come in and help you, it can certainly be beneficial. But don't ask someone if it's going to stress you out. If it's something you need to do on your own, then do it on your own. But you might consider having a system about how you're going to go through all of your items. So this is when we think about, before you even start going through things, have a plan. What are you going to do? What are you going to think about as you go through your items? So you need to have some sorting supplies, boxes or bags, and markers and tape or stickers for labeling. And there's a lot of different tips on different piles or boxes to have, but think about having 5 boxes or piles depending on how big the items are. Okay, we have a keep pile, we have a gift pile, and that's not donating, that's a gift. So that is giving an item to another person. Maybe that's a family heirloom, or an item that you don't use anymore but still has value, and your neighbor can use it, or a family member or a friend. Donate, and that is donating it, to the local thrift store or a church or a civic center. Sell and garbage. Okay, so 5 piles there. Keep, gift, donate, sell, and garbage. And if you are going to be selling or gifting an item as you go through, and I always think of, for gifting, I think of a family heirloom because there's value in it, but not monetary value, sentimental value. So if you come across something that you want to gift to a family member, rather than having to think about it later, it might seem silly, but just write their name on a Post-it note or on a little piece of masking tape and put it on that item, depending on what it is, of course. But if you're going to sell it, if you know about how much you want to sell it for, you can write on the tag how much you want to sell it for, because it takes a little bit of thought process to, do I want this? Do I want to keep it? Do I want to sell it? Once you decide you want to sell it, while you're still thinking about it, think about how much should I sell it for, and jot that on there. Of course, you come back to that once you actually get to the point of selling it, but that just helps your thought process stay with that item while you're thinking about that item. Okay, and items that hold significant meaning to you or your family, they are absolutely the most difficult. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute, but you might consider discussing those items with your family, or you might even consider making a list of items and deciding how to divide it up, or talking about it with your family. Of course, that is definitely going to be a personal decision on how to go about that. It's going to depend on the family, depend on your situation. So with that, there is a handout, the one that has green on it, the activity sheet, where you can list 3 items in your house that are really easy for you to get rid of. That if you were going to start this process today, there's 3 items that you could easily get rid of. And you would list those there. How would you get rid of it? Are you going to donate it? Are you going to sell it? And why is it so easy to part with that item? Okay, that's the easy part. The next part, you would find 3 items in your home, or think of 3 items in your home that would be really hard to get rid of. And you would list those on this sheet. And then you would write or think about, why is it so hard to get rid of that item? And that's not just an activity, that is to help you with the process of letting go of things. Because if you're downsizing, you're not going to be able to take everything with you. That's the purpose of downsizing, is getting rid of some of your possessions to be able to move into a smaller home. So this activity sheet really just helps you with that thought process of letting go of some things. Okay. Oh yeah, and the last one on there about taking breaks and don't get overwhelmed because it can be very easy to get overwhelmed with thinking about this. Not only organizing, we're not just talking about organizing, we're talking about getting rid of some of our possessions. And that can be sometimes harder or more overwhelming, I guess, than just organizing. So definitely take breaks and give yourself grace as you go through the process. So let's talk about stuff, okay? And we're going to talk about some myths and, well, some myths. So the first one is, after I lose some weight, I'll fit into these clothes again. Well, chances are, if you, and we've probably all said that, but chances are, even if you do lose the weight, those clothes might be, you know, you're not going to want to wear them again, or, you know, they're going to be out of style maybe. Research shows that if you get rid of the clothes that don't fit you anymore, wear clothes that fit you, and then once you lose weight, buy clothes that fit you, it is a little more realistic to do that. And then once you can fit into those clothes again, you can buy new clothes. So if you're holding on to clothes that you just need to lose weight to get back into, I would recommend go ahead and give those away or donate those. Here's another one. I need to keep this just in case. My thought with this one is my brother-in-law's grandmother, when they were going through her home after she had passed away and, you know, getting things out of the closet, they found a box, like a paper, large size box, and it was labeled, and the label on it was what was inside the box. It said, strings too short to use. And they were all nicely boxed up, all these little short strings. Not sure what she had planned for it, maybe just in case she needed a little bit of string, but that's something unnecessary, probably that we don't need to have in our homes, things that we can't use, and that's on the label. The next myth is, I just need to get more organized. That is a myth because organized stuff is still stuff. So you see this picture of the garage and all these nice totes, and they're all labeled, and that's good and well if you need all that space and all those totes for all your belongings. But just remember that just because it's organized doesn't necessarily mean that it's organized. I think we have a false sense that if it's in a tote with a label, it's organized, or if it's in a basket, it's organized. Not necessarily. So just think about that a little differently. This next one, but it's my grandmother's fine china, or it's my insert relationship, insert item, and I don't want to get rid of it because it's so special. And I totally understand that. I think we all have things that are emotional and sentimental to us that we want to keep. But if you're not using it, or if you don't love it, you can certainly declutter it, pass it on, sell it, take a picture of the item. That kind of goes into, oh no, it's not this one, it's the next one. But you can take a picture of the item and then pass it on. So the next one is, it was a gift and I will appear ungrateful. No, not necessarily, depending on what the gift is. But if it's not something that you are going to use or that you even want, don't carry the burden of keeping that item just because somebody gave it to you as a gift, especially if that person won't know. It brought me joy in the past, so I should keep it now. Well, that one too is a myth. Something that brought you joy in the past, if you're not using it, or if you don't really like it. I mean, I've come across things like that before, that, oh, I really, I used to wear this necklace all the time, but I haven't worn it now in 7 years, and I don't really like it that much, but I have good memories with this. Well, you can still part with that item. You don't have to keep it just because it brought you joy in the past. Maybe it's served its purpose in your life and you can pass it on. So this is the one I was talking about. If I get rid of whatever it might be, fill in the blank, I will be getting rid of the memory that goes along with it. And this is probably the hardest one because we have things that have memories with it. But if you take a picture of it, now depending on what it is, of course, and there's some things that with sentimental value that are easier to get rid of than others, but you can take a picture with it and you can write the story down about that item. Whether or not you keep the item, I would recommend writing the story down. I think that helps get the memory out there, and it also helps to pass it down to future generations. So I just want to share a video. Actually, Rita is going to share the video. I'm going to stop sharing. This is just a video about our things, our stuff, and why we are so attached to them. It's very interesting.
After witnessing the violent rage shown by babies whenever deprived of an item they considered their own, Jean Piaget, a founding father of child psychology, observed something profound about human nature. Our sense of ownership emerges incredibly early. Why are we so clingy? There's a well-established phenomenon in psychology known as the endowment effect, where we value
Rita, you muted yourself and we can't hear the video.
chose the mug and half chose the chocolate. That is, they seemed to value the two rewards similarly. Other students were given a mug first and then a surprise chance to swap it for a chocolate bar, but only 11% wanted to. Yet another group started out with chocolate, and most preferred to keep it rather than swap. In other words, the students nearly always put greater value on whichever reward they started out with. Part of this has to do with how quickly we form connections between our sense of self and the things we consider ours. That can even be seen at the neural level. In one experiment, neuroscientists scanned participants' brains while they allocated various objects either to a basket labeled mine or another labeled Alex's. When participants subsequently looked at their new things, their brains showed more activity in a region that usually flickers into life whenever we think about ourselves. Another reason we're so fond of our possessions is that from a young age, we believe they have a unique essence. Psychologists showed us this by using an illusion to convince 3 to 6-year-olds they built a copying machine, a device that could create perfect replicas of any item. When offered a choice between their favorite toy or an apparently exact copy, the majority of the children favored the original. In fact, they were often horrified at the prospect of taking home a copy. This magical thinking about objects isn't something we grow out of. Rather, it persists into adulthood while becoming ever more elaborate. For example, consider the huge value placed on items that have been owned by celebrities. It's as if the buyers believed the objects they'd purchased were somehow imbued with the essence of their former celebrity owners. For similar reasons, many of us are reluctant to part with family heirlooms, which help us feel connected to lost loved ones. These beliefs can even alter our perception of the physical world and change our athletic abilities. Participants in a recent study were told they were using a golf putter once owned by the champion Ben Curtis. During the experiment, they perceived the hole as being about a centimeter larger than control participants using a standard putter, and they sank slightly more putts. Although feelings of ownership emerge early in life, culture also plays a part. For example, it was recently discovered that Hadza people of northern Tanzania, who are isolated from modern culture, don't exhibit the endowment effect. That's possibly because they live in an egalitarian society where almost everything is shared. At the other extreme, sometimes our attachment to our things can go too far. Part of the cause of hoarding disorder is an exaggerated sense of responsibility and protectiveness toward one's belongings. That's why people with this condition find it so difficult to throw anything away. What remains to be seen today is how the nature of our relationship with our possessions will change with the rise of digital technologies. Many have forecast the demise of physical books and music, but for now at least, this seems premature. Perhaps there will always be something uniquely satisfying about holding an object in our hands and calling it our own.
Okay, thank you, Rita, for sharing that. Was just a little.
Your space, but don't want to break your budget? At Hobby Lobby.
Okay, we good? Okay, so that video it may have gone a little in depth about the psychology behind why we like our stuff and why, you know, we're more interested in something that's mine than something that's Elizabeth's. Just kind of something to think about when we go through the process of getting rid of some of our things. And even, you know, in thinking, sometimes I have to think about it in a greater aspect of just this thing that I like, that brings me joy, or that I use, or whatever it might be, that has a memory to it. But think about the grander perspective of, I only get to have this thing while I'm here on this earth. Do I really, and I know that I'm young, but I really do think about, like, do I want somebody else to, you know, have to make the decision for me? No, I'll just get rid of it now. But that's, I don't know, kind of the thought process of going through our stuff and why it can be so emotional. So the last objective is to identify strategies for preparing to move into the new, smaller home. And this would be like making a checklist. So what should be done prior to moving day, which is going to be, you know, going through all your possessions. That's going to be the biggest bulk of time and energy. So what should be done prior to? How should you have it organized? What are you going to do on moving day? Because it seems like, well, we're just going to, you know, pack everything in trucks and go. It needs to be a little more specific than that. Who's going to help you? What time are you going to do it? You know, what boxes are going to go where? And what's going to happen immediately following moving day? And that would be unpacking. And you'll probably find that if you've ever moved, you know, sometimes when you unpack and you think, well, why did I pack this up and bring it with me? I should have just gotten rid of it before I packed it up. And that's okay to do that. So at this time, if there's any questions or comments, you can type those in the chat or the comment box. But just as closing, Rita, go ahead.
We do have one comment from Wendy, and she just said that you are hitting all the key reasons it's hard for people to let go of things.
Yes.
So true.
Yes, it definitely is. And I think if you think about that, you know, and like I said in the beginning, give yourself grace, because it is hard to let go of some things, not to mention the house itself. Because if you've been living in a house, you know, even for just a few years, you have a lot of memories there, let alone, you know, a house that you've lived in for 20, 30, 40 years, where maybe your children grew up and your grandkids came to see you. There's a lot of memories just in that house. So yeah, it definitely is a difficult process. It's very personal for all of us too, not just the downsizing, but the organizing and the deciding of what to do with your belongings. Certainly emotional, but with a task as big as downsizing, having a plan will help you to minimize the stress and the uncertainty of the process. It'll still be emotional, but hopefully it'll help you to flow through the process a little easier. But it can certainly be a way to simplify your life, whether you're moving next door or across the state or across the country. Just remember to give yourself time to complete the process. Hopefully you have the time to give yourself time, because it is a process, and just keep your goal in mind as you go through the process. Oops. So just as a review, the 3 easy steps of downsizing are: identify your needs and your wants for a new home, prepare your current home and your possessions, and prepare for moving day and for physically moving to your new home. So as a reminder, those handouts, I'll post the links again for anybody who needs those. And no matter where you are in the state, whether you're in the Fort Herod area or in another county, you can contact your local extension office also, and we can get you hooked up with those materials. Rita?
Elizabeth, we have had a request asking if we can put the TED link in the chat box.
Sure, yes.
We also have a request for that on Facebook as well.
Okay, I just put it in the chat.
And we also have a request in the chat box. Can we also receive the slides or send them to the extension office?
Sure, yeah, I can send those to the extension agents if you would like a copy of those. Yeah. All the information in the PowerPoint, though, it came from the materials, mainly the one main handout of downsizing your home. So, but yeah, I can send those to the agents.
Thank you. Let's see, is there anything else? Yes, and we will not forget about Anderson.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here today. And if you have any other questions, you can just, like I said, contact your local extension service. Thanks, everybody. Bye.